I'm sure the people who aren't here are either in the bathroom or at my wife's presentation. So thank you all who aren't here for saving my marriage. She's much better looking and interesting than me. But it's mostly about these guys. Quick introductions. I'm Drew. I'm CEO of AdmitHub. We build conversational AI to get kids to and through college. I'm joined here from left to right. Andreas is the general manager at ETS, Educational Testing Services, Research Division. He oversees research centers focused on the development and validation of generalizable research capabilities, which includes automated scoring, natural language processing, speech processing, and machine learning. Andreas, thank you. Nirmal is the development lead for the Watson education platform. Essentially, he operates a startup within IBM Watson focused on automatic scoring, standards alignment, and AI tutoring. Nirmal's focus is also on ethics and how AI is applied in the context of education, so definitely relevant to everyone here. And finally, Eleni, thank you, is the founder of Choosito, an education technology professor at UPenn. She's a recognized AI scholar with 100 scientific publications. It's been a couple weeks since we talked, so maybe 101. In the area of discourse, text analysis, and readability. She's passionate about AI to improve personalized learning. And with support from the National Science Foundation, her team at Choosito has built a powerful search engine to analyze open educational resources and match them to reading comprehension abilities of learners. In short, they're helping fight illiteracy one search at a time. So without further ado, we've got a lot to cover, so I'm just going to dive right into the topics of conversation. I'll try to keep things moving quickly, and then we'll make time for some audience questions at the very end. Let's start. First of all, machine learning is a bit of misunderstood topic, but it's a very broad category, and most times people confuse it with AI. And really, AI is just a subset of machine learning that resembles, in particular, what we consider human intelligence. AI is the thing that gets a lot of headlines, but underneath it's machine learning, and very often a thing called deep learning with neural networks that underlies it. I often like to say, in the equation of machines thinking, a bird and a jet plane both tend to fly. But obviously, a jet plane flies in a dramatically different fashion than a bird does. Similarly, AI and humans both think, but they have dramatically different abilities. Now, this analogy when we all met, Andreas disagreed with a little bit vehemently. So I'd like you to explain a little bit why this metaphor is a terrible one.
Yeah. Awful terrible. No, so when you make a metaphor about that they both fly, you assume that they're interchangeable and that they both try to reach the same goal, right? Fly from point A to B to do something. And I think that's not how it works. I think they're actually complementing and different things. So one is flying and the other one might be crawling or doing something different. Computers were invented to essentially do things that we humans are not that good at. Comparing thousands and thousands of variables at the same time, adding a lot of numbers very quickly. And I think that's a frame to look at AI and machine learning into. They are tools that do things that actually humans are not very good at. And so when you talk about people saying like, oh, these tools are taking away jobs or taking away tasks, etc. I think there are very few tasks that are now being guided by AI or by certain levels of automation where we can say like, oh, I wish we were still doing that. I wish we were still putting screws on toothpaste tubes in a factory, right? There's very few things that we actually think are worth still having.
Thank you. So AI and machine learning are very broad categories, and there are tons of applications. We're going to try and hone in on a few of them. Eleni, given your vast experience in academia and startups, I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about information retrieval, particular to language and in your work, if you don't mind.
Of course. I want to wear my linguistics hat first and say that intelligence, in artificial intelligence or other uses, comes from the Latin word intelligere, which means to understand. So why is that important? When we're looking at the internet and the content that is out there, clearly we see that the internet is giving us access to an unprecedented amount of content. Okay? But sometimes I feel we are confusing access to internet search results with access to information. So we are informed only when we read content that we can understand. And when we understand, then we have information. That information that we understand, we can use and apply, and that is knowledge. So in order to learn from the internet, to learn from these resources that we particularly care about, especially the open educational resources that are a great opportunity, we need to develop some kind of technology that can match the ability of the learner to access and understand the content. So since, as you mentioned, we are at Choosito, we're trying to develop that technology. So we are analyzing the content, the difficulty of the content, to match it with the capability of the learner, the reading capability, the background of the learner, and their interests. Okay? So machine learning, AI and machine learning and natural language processing, coupled with an understanding of how learners learn, make it possible to actually leverage now the amazing wealth of open educational resources and other resources that are digitally available to provide a very, very low cost learning in education.
It's a great segue to you, Nirmal. I had the pleasure of testing out the new IBM Watson AI tutor. I don't know if any of you in the room have seen it. But coupled with both open educational resources and in partnership with Pearson, it's pretty astounding. I would describe it a little like Mad Libs, but fueled by artificial intelligence. But I wonder if you could enlighten us a little bit about your perspective on how AI can deeply impact teaching and learning.
So yeah, I haven't heard that description of the tutor before. Thanks for that. But I think AI, as has been talked about, I think is clear to most of us, is going to impact every industry. Education is no exception to that. I think it will have a role to play across the board for different roles, if we want to think of it that way, for impacting the learner as well as the educator as well as the administrator. So from the perspective of the learner, I think the most exciting thing out there is helping learners acquire knowledge in ways that are most efficient for them. We talk about personalized education, and that's a little bit of an overused term, but I think we have the ability now, or we are getting there anyway, to deliver something that's close to a one-on-one educational experience. What we have done is kind of a first step in that direction. What we call adaptive learning systems, what's out there for the most part, are largely very, very simple, and they are built or marketed as personalized, but they're really a long way from that. So I think we can create much more sophisticated systems that deliver something truly personalized, a truly human-like experience for the learner that can deliver results. And it's not been proven yet, but I think that's the direction in which we're going. So that's for the learner. For the educator, there is a wealth of information, of ways of teaching, of ways of applying processes that help deliver education in a way that's efficient and effective. I think the practices to do that and what's actually done is more of an art and based on individual judgment. I think there's a role to play for technology to help the educator, from things as mundane as selecting the right resources for a particular learner to the process to follow for teaching a class. And I think there's leaps and bounds of change that will happen in that respect in the next few years. And then finally, scoping out to the institutions and the administrators in the educational experience, right from the perspective of what school should a learner attend, to how do you make sure they graduate, or whether it's graduate high school or whatever it is. There are tools that can be applied to help learners, to help institutions deliver education more effectively, and I think it'll be pervasive in that respect as well. So I don't think there'll be really any part of the spectrum that's left untouched. In terms of the kinds of technologies and sophistication, it might range from simple predictive analytics all the way to personalized human-like companions that are helping learners and educators.
Just before the mics went live, you made the comment to me that the advancements, particularly in natural language processing, but machine learning in general, over the past 12 to 18 months, essentially dwarf the innovations that have happened in the past 10 years. What are the most exciting things on the horizon in your estimation, Nirmal?
So you talked about deep learning in the introduction, and deep learning has come a long way. I would say one of the most exciting things I've seen recently is the impression we had as recently as 12 months ago is that deep learning is fantastic, but hey, in order to use it, you need huge amounts of labeled data, and then you can extract some patterns and do amazing things like recognize faces or recognize speech and so on and so forth. And while that is true, there is a lot of recent work on transferable machine learning, which is to say you can create models based on a certain set of data that have certain characteristics and apply those models for purposes that they were not specifically trained for. What that implies is that you can take one of these general purpose models that have been built by others. For example, there are ones that are open source available from Google, and there's one from Facebook and things like that. And you can essentially pick those up, apply to a different problem, and achieve excellent results that weren't possible even 12 months ago. So that to me is really exciting, because you don't have to spend long effort creating your own massive data set to apply deep learning anymore.
Eleni, from the perspective of an entrepreneur, anything to add?
Yeah, actually a lot to add, and maybe something I had not prepared to say, but I will say that I think it's maybe interesting to kind of look at the history of AI a little bit and kind of get an understanding of why it's working again all of a sudden. So AI is not new, right? You may remember that back in the 50s, it was very exciting academically. DARPA got excited, started funding AI projects because they were interested in getting automated translations around the world and so on and so forth. And then it died out for a couple of decades, right? And now it's all back again. So the difference between 20 years ago and now is interesting, because I think it also clarifies that artificial intelligence isn't the intelligence that humans have. So it's not about, oh, let's create replicas of humans. And I don't think that it's very useful to think about it like that. So the reason why artificial intelligence is working again so well is because of three things. One is that machine learning is an observer, is a huge observer. That's it, right? So learning with what the machine learns is observing things that people have labeled, right?
Data, yes.
Data, okay? And it has nothing to do necessarily with how we learn, because no baby ever had to see 100,000 images of a face to be able to recognize a face. The thing is, though, machine learning can do it without, you crunch it, right? So you let it go, and then it will observe patterns that are useful to us to extend our capabilities. So the reason why it is possible now is because now we have a lot of storage, right, to put all this data, and we have a lot of computation capability to analyze this data. So now these observations are both possible and also done at a scale that is useful for us. Okay. But it has nothing to do with, necessarily with how we learn. Now, with deep learning and the neural capabilities, let me tie it up to the information retrieval that I mentioned earlier. So deep learning indeed can learn a lot of things without labeled data. And this is cool. In some cases, it works very well. So for example, what we are doing with the information retrieval, right? So how is information retrieval, how can information retrieval become better? Well, it becomes better because if you're thinking of using AI for personalized learning, which I think is where AI will be used massively in education, then you need to be able to extract content to support teachers and learners in building personalized curricula, not just answering a question by looking it up on the web, right? So how are you going to do that? So deep learning can help. I'll give an example. Because it can capture relationships between words, which means that it's called word embeddings. And what that does is that you can, for example, search for giraffe. So you can give the keyword giraffe, and then the model can understand that maybe you're also interested in text about lions, all right? So you see, it makes it, and that data can learn by itself. We don't need to label anything, right? So it can understand this kind of more useful connections between words, such that we can transform now like a typical search engine to a tool that can actually select content for you. And if you can make it smarter with other capabilities, then it's even better. So that's how deep learning and this kind of technologies can actually work in many cases. What excites me the most?
Tell us.
About where this all is going is that not only can we support teachers and learners build personalized paths, and there are so many other applications like automated homework support, or automated scoring, automated assessment to help both teachers and learners. I am excited because these capabilities now can be used to provide educational opportunities at low or no cost at scale, and finally maybe able to fight illiteracy in the world. So that's what makes it more exciting to me, because we can start looking at how to use these tools, not only to improve the learning experience in a formal education context, but also in a context that includes, for example, 60 million girls around the world that do not have access to schools, or the 3 million refugee kids that are stranded in camps and have no other solution. So that excites me a lot in where this technology can go and what it can do.
So when you point out the fact that massive amounts of data are incredibly beneficial, I think about you, Andreas, in that you are living the dream of most machine learning data scientists at ETS with an incredible amount of data. Can you share a little bit about the affordances of such data sets?
So my favorite Saturday Night Live character is Debbie Downer. Right?
Okay.
So I'm going to be a little bit Debbie Downer to start with, and then I'll try to end at a high. I think when we're talking about sort of these unlabeled machine learning, unsupervised machine learning applications, what it takes is massive data.
Yes.
Because it's almost like a compensatory thing, right? If you have a very high quality labeled data, you don't need a lot to get something really well going. And if you have sort of unsupervised or non-labeled data, you'll need a lot, because you need a lot of patterns of students who do well that the machine can kind of pick up natively and then classify these things and then model the independent variables on that. And so I think the misconception about education is that it's big data, because it's not. Education has a lot of data, but it's a lot of small data. It's contextualized within a classroom, it's contextualized within a curriculum, it's contextualized within a district, and a particular situation that a student is in. And so I think I am not as optimistic about these generalizable models. But I do, and this goes back to a session I was in this morning I attended, where they're talking about sort of the growth opportunities in India and China, and I think that's where these things are going to work much better, because you have a more uniform context of a single curriculum, a single method, and a lot of data. And so you create a lot of data, and you can do a lot of this stuff. I think the US situation where things are very local control. This goes back to the the Revolutionary War. It's very much local control. It's going to be a lot harder. Now, I think because where I think I see a lot of opportunity, besides the doing for social good, I think that's a real opportunity where there's no other alternative. But I think where we're going to see a lot of interesting big data or bigger data is where we look at things like essay writing. And we're picking up keystroke data. And we're picking up how students, timing data and things like that. And I think if done well, and if you're very careful with what you do with the data, I think that's the kind of data that can really help inform students sort of understanding better how they approach something, how much time they spend on something, what better ways are of spending time on things, and sort of that's where you can really attach meaning to the data that we collect. Because the AI itself doesn't create meaning, right? Data itself doesn't create meaning. We create meaning. People create meaning. And so it is that connection with the writing process, or with a conversation, or even with things like indicators of whether you're bored or confused and things like that, that can help students make that next step. So that's where I see a lot of excitement.
You mentioned if you're careful with the data, which makes me think of the privacy concerns that are front and center in the news today about, well, frankly, our smartphones observing a lot about us. And in an educational setting, obviously we have legislation like FERPA to protect students.
Right.
But Nirmal, I wonder if you could wax poetic a little bit on some of the privacy concerns and things you think can protect people.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting tension in a way, because you do need data collected at scale in order to create systems that deliver value for society. Conversely, you need that data protected for the individuals. So I think as a society, it's a challenge to balance those things. It's clear that education data is highly sensitive, belongs to the individuals, and that's how it should be. And there should probably be some universal privacy declaration to that effect for this kind of data, whether it's education and health and other sensitive things. That does not necessarily make the use of this kind of data to build scalable systems impossible. Because I think there's been significant amount of work put into how things can be anonymized or masked in order to make data available for machine learning, while at the same time protecting individuals. That also involves making sure data is collected in a way that's free from bias, and then using models created from that data for the benefit of society. It's not something that a single company or university could necessarily do, but I think in order to really improve state-of-the-art at scale, that's the kind of thing that would have to be done, is balance these two things.
So it seems like there's a rising tide for legislation about this sort of thing, and you could have draconian legislation that is very protective of individual privacy, but you say that would stifle innovation. It's ironic that we say the most innovative country is China, which seems to be most permissive with people's data. What's the happy medium? Is there a sense of how you would thread the needle to get the most out of the science without jeopardizing the sort of privacy of people?
Yeah, I think it's important to define an individual's data the right way. Data that identifies the individual, that has characteristics that can allow you to reconstruct who that individual might be, obviously needs to be protected. But I think you can derive data from that does the necessary masking and transformation, that preserves essential features that make it usable, while at the same time, guaranteeing individual rights. I think it's, they almost need to be done together in order to deliver value for society.
I want to add to that.
Please.
I want to add to that. It's going to be unpopular, what I'm going to say. I have tried it with my teacher students, and it doesn't go down very well. But I think we have...
Get your pitchforks ready.
But I think we need to take some distance and see how the issue with the data becomes an obstacle for AI for good for a reason which is completely independent of privacy. I don't think anybody would ever worry about data privacy if the data were used to improve children's education, to improve an outcome. The reason why we have a data privacy issue is because we are used to an ad-based business model that makes companies that are huge and successful make money out of selling the data because everything else is free. And I want us to face that. I want us to face the consequences of selling so cheaply our data and creating an obstacle to applications that could use this data to actually benefit us. And now because we don't want to pay for search, or we don't want to pay for Facebook, or why we don't want to pay for social media, like the couple of dollars a month that it would cost us to have these amazing technologies, now we are having this obstacle. So I believe a lot that we have a problem with data, but the source of the problem, and therefore why the solution would be looked there, is not, oh, we don't respect the privacy. It's not we, it's not the people that develop educational applications. It's that, you know, other companies are making money out of selling the data. So the privacy of the data is only relevant when somebody sells the data.
What's the adage? If you encounter a product that's free, look again because you are the product.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? And
or free Gmail.
Or free Gmail. But as long as these places churn out really great tools, I mean, there's a lot not to like about Gmail, but there's also a lot to like about it. I think it's, yeah, I think I'm with you. I don't think it will be practical. I think this is about figuring out different, maybe even different business models, different engagement models for being able to bring good educational tools to people at scale, rather than, you know, this data that gets sold and traded everywhere.
That's a good segue to another hot button issue. The most common question usually gets asked in an audience like this is AI going to take my job? Probably not anyone's job in this room, but it will take or make obsolete many, many millions of jobs in the support, call centers, truck drivers. There's a lot of labor that will be subverted, frankly. And it's threatening not because this hasn't happened before. It's certainly happened in the Industrial Revolution with tools doing the work of our muscles. I think the threat to our identity is that this technology is doing the work of our minds. But it will also create a great deal of jobs. And I am of the mind that it is a moral imperative of people in the industry of education or ideally in data science to use the same technology that will ultimately displace jobs to accelerate and amplify the education process. Eleni, I know you believe strongly in this, but I would welcome everyone to sort of elaborate really quickly. Do you want to go first?
Sure,
to kick us off?
So for workforce upskilling and reskilling, I think that AI will play a critical role because there are two challenges that I think only AI may be able to address. So one is the huge diversity of backgrounds and knowledge of the workforce, like the people that need to be retrained or upskilled. So for these population of learners, personalization is not an option, it's the only option. So things that we were used to, like grade level material, makes no sense, right? Trying to identify content to reskill somebody by saying, okay, is this kind of 5th grade or 7th grade or 12th grade material is irrelevant. So now, because what you know, I mean, and these are people that may have been out of school for 10 years. So we need a different pedagogy and definitely a personalized approach. So in terms of where I think the technology is going and how AI can help, you will be looking or be on the lookout for simplification technologies. So simplification of content, simplification of concept in a way that, I don't know, somebody who's 45 years old with marketing and sales background, what is the background of that person? How can we tap on that to actually talk about artificial intelligence? How do we simplify the concepts? So we will be looking into simplification technology.
So you're giving the good side. Nirmal, can you give us, well, the shortcomings? Where does AI fail us? It's not the end-all, be-all.
Oh, absolutely. So I think AI and even the things we've been talking about, whether it's in giving you the right content and helping you with personalized learning and so on, all of these are kind of related to information retrieval. In the end, it's looking up stuff, giving it to you. But education is far, far more than that, right? So it's about sparking curiosity. It's about leading a person the right way, being a mentor. It's about enabling cooperation and collaboration between individuals. So these are things that AI will not be able to do in the short term to medium term, maybe not even in the long term. And so I think there'll always be a role for humans to be at the center of delivering education with a lot of assistance from AI tools. It's going to be assistance of the form that, I go to this example of 2,500 years ago, writing was invented and people had these stone tablets where they'd write things, and suddenly teachers had a tool they could use with their students who were probably the Pharaoh's sons or whatever it is. And then that became more democratized when printing was invented. And then, now there's information everywhere. So, but that's obviously not the same as imparting education. So humans would always be at the center of the process. They just have more powerful tools. And I think it's perhaps a relief to some of us that we aren't going to be completely irrelevant. we'll just be doing different things and hopefully more effectively.
So recently,
Can I jump?
Yes, please.
So I will say currently we barely have enough teachers to teach the students we have.
Yes.
So I would say that's not a job that goes away. In fact, we need AI and we need technology just to keep up. Because you cannot expect a teacher to still have, there were strikes, right, in LA for these students. And you have students from very at the bottom to at the top. And you're this one teacher standing in front of that. It's extremely hard. And so those jobs will not go away. Also, AI is not some universal thing that is pushed upon us. I mean, we create AI, we support AI, we pay for AI, we make AI. And so while that is, on the one hand, scary because we sometimes do things that we don't, where the intended consequences become unintended consequences. At the same time, AI will be a step behind us because the minute we automate something, the minute we create a model, that becomes a norm and we come up with something else we want. And we will always come up with something else that we want before the thing can be automated. Or at least somebody can come up. So what I'm then worried about is that since these things are not evenly distributed, that there is a chance that we're kind of losing a generation for whom these advances in automation go too fast.
Well, can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Recently, the nation of Finland announced that they would make the fundamentals of artificial intelligence available or core to the instruction of all young people. A lot of people don't fully understand what this means, but if you were going to teach the youth of America the fundamentals of AI, well, what would that be? What would that constitute? What would prepare them for the future?
For me, that will be a course in philosophy more than anything. It's the fundamentals of philosophy rather than the fundamentals of coding, AI, machine learning. It's about how we think about what it means to be a person, identity, and things like that. So that to me is the fundamentals of AI. It's a philosophy course.
Anyone else? Nirmal? You're smirking.
No, I mean, yeah, I couldn't. It's just the idea of philosophy driving the full understanding, I think, would be incomplete. And I would say that you do need some technical underpinning, though I agree that sometimes what is lacking is that broader view. So it needs to be combined with an idea of the technology, what the shortcomings are, and having a realistic picture of what this can and cannot do. So getting into some of that as well. But I think it is essential. I wish that we were as forward thinking as that. I think it's a great step that they're taking. And I think, one other thing to touch on as far as how we teach our kids is, we talked earlier about privacy. One of the things that sometimes concerns me a little bit is perhaps, and maybe this should not concern me, I don't know, younger people have a very different view of privacy than we might, and then our people older than us might. And I wonder if there should be something around that of why this is a good thing necessarily, or maybe we shouldn't care and people want to give the information away and they don't care how it's used, and maybe they're fine with that. But I think there's a lot of literacy that needs to happen around these topics that should be part of instruction.
Thank you.
We need to teach our kids to develop 5 different persona, right, to work with, because that's what we do, right? Different accounts for different things.
If your kids are on Instagram, you know they have 5 accounts already,
exactly.
at least. I want to open up to audience questions, give a few minutes. Yes, go ahead. And actually, if folks want to line up at the microphone, that could be easier to save time rather than call on, but keep going. Yes.
My name is Leah Pillsbury, and I'm a student at Boston University. My question is mainly for Eleni, but really for everyone. It's really exciting what you said about using this to transform on a large scale, take a country where there aren't enough teachers or refugee camps or something. But I hear a lot of people talking about the potential, and then when you get down to it, everyone still wants to have classrooms and wants to have teachers. Like, if UNHCR came to you and said, design something that would work in a refugee camp, or government of country X did something equivalent, like, what do we have, where would we start, and what still needs to be either invented technologically or just developed in terms of curriculum and pedagogy to make something like this actually work in those types of environments?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. I think I came along as talking about not having teachers, which was not the intention. All these are tools in the hands of teachers and learners. It's more kind of helping both in personalized paths. What I mentioned about the scalability is not that we prefer not to have teachers, but for the global illiteracy project that I was talking about, just like as you said, we would need to have tomorrow 2 million new teachers to be able to give access to educational experiences in 100 million kids in the world. This cannot happen. So it's not that we prefer not to have teachers. We prefer, when there is at least one teacher, to give that one teacher the tools that he or she needs to be able to be more effective with a larger amount of kids, because we simply do not have enough teachers. It's a misconception, and thank you for saying that. It's a misconception. We need more teachers. It's just they're not there.
My question is, so if you're a teacher in a refugee camp and you want to use these tools, like, what tools exist and what tools still need to be created?
So I will tell you exactly what we're doing with that. So this year we are developing technology. So technology is to help teachers and learners find the content that they need and they can understand, and create a path, like a mini curriculum. So we will be doing tests in 2 refugee camps in Greece and another 3 schools in refugee camps in Lebanon. And the way we're doing that is we're offering the teacher the tool to find resources for the kids where you don't know what their abilities are. So you could have a kid that is 11 years old, but you don't know how long they've been out of school, right? So what will the teacher teach, right? So with the technology, we can say, okay, where are you? Where is this kid? And then we can help the teacher take the content, okay? So the content that the kid can understand. That's why my emphasis was on the understanding. Yes, it is AI in development. I'm not saying that all these tools are out there polished and ready to go, but that's where I would like to see the AI improving and supporting the educational experience.
It's essentially if you could give every teacher a teacher's assistant, you would.
Exactly.
We can't, but we can have technology that can approximate it to a great deal.
So that's where I want to see the AI going for education.
But we should not equate individualized learning with isolated a kid in front of an iPad or a Chromebook 24/7 learning. It's really important to learn in groups, to learn by happenstance,
yes.
to learn by teaching. So I think that this idea that individualized learning is therefore by yourself, one-on-one, looking at Mukhl courses is a real big mistake, because that's not how learning works.
I agree. 100%.
And that's also not how effective learning works. That might be a small portion that you do some individual work, but it shouldn't be the only thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And next question.
Tom Collin, I'm an advisor to private equity investors in education. I would like to reinforce your statements about the importance of AI in future years, but also I notice how you are managing expectations, that we're not there yet. Being on the front lines of these issues, I'm the chairman of the board of the largest English language training company in Vietnam, which teaches today 25,000 kids. I'm daily confronted with the issue of a shortage of teachers. We can't find them. There's not enough of them. They don't make them fast enough. They don't want to stay long enough. So today, already, we're facing this shortage in a much more bounded environment. Teaching English to 6 to 12-year-old kids is fairly finite. And in these more circumscribed areas of learning, I think AI should have a very powerful impact in the very short term. We're talking the next 3 to 5 years. What do you think?
I agree. I think multiple, I think what he's building, what we're building, they're all tools and things that will at least get us a good part of the way there. 3 to 5 years sounds right. Intelligent tutoring systems, dialogue systems, a lot of things focused on the communication aspects of English, which is one of the big things. And this shortage is true in where you are. It's everywhere. Everywhere there's the amount of salary that private tutoring companies now pay. Or even there's multiple that actually have people here in the US that get up at night and tutor kids in China all night, right? That's a very common practice these days. So, yeah.
And we have 1 minute left, so I just wanted to pause. Thank you for your question. I'm sorry we won't be able to take any others. I did want to give everyone the opportunity here on the panel to just tell the audience what you were hoping they would take away, if they could take one thing away from the discussion today. You want to start from you, Eleni?
Sure. I want to say I'm very grateful that you mentioned this, the clarification about personalized learning and the role of AI in that. Personalized learning is not about one person learning by themselves. It's about differentiation in learning. So you could be having a group of people all working on the same topic, but they have different backgrounds, so they will be working with different materials, resources, doing things. So I want to emphasize that personalized learning is not moving into a world of isolation where an individual is by themselves and a device. It's about catering to individual needs and allowing individuals in a larger context to be engaging with meaningful materials. The takeaway message probably is clear, is we can build artificial intelligence for good, and we can address very big challenges in education by making appropriate use of the tools. I think AI can be a great help for educators and learners.
Nirmal?
So I think my message is that you hear a lot of hype about AI. We need to be realistic. AI is a lot dumber than you think. For every system that can beat humans at chess or Go or something like that is tons of data and work that happen behind the scenes to solve that particular problem using a set of techniques. The fact that those techniques exist is exciting, but applying them in education in a careful way to produce something that's effective takes time and effort. It's not simple. So don't expect a revolution overnight. I think these are gradual changes that will happen over time. And perhaps if we look back 5 years from now, we'll think it's been a revolution, but there won't be an aha moment where we have, you know, something completely unexpected. You know, I just think it's going to take time and effort. That's all. Just make sure we're all realistic.
Andreas?
Yeah, so there's not a whole lot of intelligence going on yet in AI. And I think that's really important. It's not that smart. But also don't underestimate how extremely powerful smart automation can be. So even if it's not that intelligent, smart automation can be very powerful.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time.